This podcast is brought to you by Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine for those that love to make and drink great beer. Learn more online or subscribe at beerandbrewing.com or find us on social media at Craft Beer Brew.
Well, hi everybody, welcome to the broadcast. I'm John Holl, the senior editor of Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine, and my guest today is Scott Metzger, who started his professional career in academia as an economics professor and in the banking and oil refining industries before finding his calling in one of the more fun, flavorful industries, the world of craft brewing. He had that homebrewer's dream and a vow made on New Year's Eve in 2005, and Freetail Brewing, his brewery, officially opened on Black Friday in 2008, becoming at the time San Antonio's second operating brewery and Scott's first completed New Year's resolution. Coming from a place where craft beer was, and still is in many respects, very much a niche product, Freetail set out to change San Antonio's impression of what beer was and could be. Freetail originally operated strictly as a brew pub with to-go bombers sales until 2014 when it opened up a production brewery following Texas laws changing. And now today Freetail operates both the production brewery and the brew pub and will produce about 5,000 barrels combined this year. Scott's a member of the Brewers Association Board of Directors. He served two-year terms as an at-large member, and for the past year, he served as chair of the Events and Diversity Committees. Past committee work includes the brew pubs and finance committees. He's also a five-time veteran CBC speaker and has served on the CBC seminar subcommittee. Scott, welcome to the broadcast after that very long and very, very thorough introduction that you gave me.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me, and I didn't realize that you were going to read the whole thing. I would have made it a little shorter for you.
It's early. This is GABF week. We are here in Denver. We're recording at our hotel, so thanks for coming out early. My voice is going to get progressively worse as the week goes on, so I'm glad we're getting this in early. And you just flew in this morning as well, so we'll see when that coffee kicks in for both of us.
Yeah, and I'm going to progressively get tireder as the days roll on as well. So I'm glad this is my first thing we're doing.
Talk to me about that New Year's resolution. And to go from academics and to go from what is a pretty studious industry to one that demands a lot of attention, but is also wildly different.
Yeah, my dream and my story was not, I don't think, very different than what we see of, around the landscape of the rest of the country. I think the only really key unique thing about it is that we were in San Antonio, where until that time, nobody dared to, execute the same kind of dream and follow through the same kind of passion. And in fact, a lot of people thought those who did, meaning me, were stupid. So,
was that Texas specific or just San Antonio specific?
Austin, has had a long booming scene, mm-hmm. But even. Yeah, at that time, Houston and Dallas were not by any means booming. And really outside of Austin, the entire state was kind of a craft beer wasteland. I think when we opened, there was something like 8 breweries operating in Texas, which is the second, highest beer consuming state in the country. So that doesn't make a lot of sense, simply from a supply and demand perspective. I kind of got into beer after moving away for a little bit. I lived in Manhattan for a short stay in grad school, and kind of got introduced to a lot of imports and not so much American craft per se, but
New York's a lousy beer town,
yeah. Right? Yeah, and especially this was 2001, 2002, but and honestly before then. Like in college, I really didn't like beer. I was going to college in Texas. The options were fairly limited.
Lone Star, Shiner,
Bud
Light. Yeah.
A fancy party in college would have a keg of Shiner, ooh, right?
Yeah.
But it was usually Natty.
Okay.
So I was not a big beer fan in college. So it wasn't until moving on, being a professional, for a little while, and then going to grad school in New York and being introduced to a wider range in flavors that I really got interested in beer in general. And then I moved back to San Antonio in 2003. Got introduced to craft beer in a bigger way when the Flying Saucer, a great craft beer chain around in the South, opened up a location in San Antonio, right across the street from my apartment, and it was all kind of downhill from there.
Did you do the whole tour? Did you get your saucer on the wall?
I have a few plates, that now are some of the best POS our brewery has. We've just put a Freetail sticker on that plate, and it's in a great location. And you can't buy that kind of placement. Well, you can. It cost 400 beers.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. So, but that was my how I got into craft beer, and then I started home brewing, and at that time I was working in for a large oil refining company, traveling around the country, and a lot of the times to California, where we had some refineries. And we'd spend our spare time going to the Yard House, or if there happened to be a brewery, we would stop in and really got turned on and said, hey, this is happening all around the country. It's not happening in Texas. It's definitely not happening in San Antonio. And then my curiosity started to run wild, and why can't that happen in San Antonio? Mm-hmm. So toyed with the idea for a few years. Had kind of some mock business plan. I wouldn't even call them serious business plans, but kind of done some of the rough economics on it, and said, hey, I think that could be viable. So when some friends and I were on a ski trip in 2005 on New Year's Eve in Albuquerque at Shama River Brewing, which was a little sad to read.
They just closed.
Yeah, just closed. So that's a place that's special to me, because that's where I kind of told my friends, I'm gonna do this. That was my New Year's resolution, and not only is the first one I've ever kept, but still the only one I've ever kept to open a brewery in San Antonio. So it took 3 years to go from deciding to do it to executing it. I was, in 2005 when I made that decision, I was 26 years old. So going to meet with banks and landlords and things like that didn't necessarily always go well. They tend to, and especially, as we got closer and closer to 2008, they were very not keen on lending some, 20-year-old a bunch of money.
Sure, but with the finance background, though, I mean, you obviously looked into it and saw that you could make it work. But what I find interesting, though, is that you opened up a brew pub to begin with, because, I mean, these days, nobody's really thinking about opening up a brew pub, but back then, you had to. I mean, there's really no other viable option if you were going to be small. You had to have, just also by virtue of state law, if you wanted to sell beer out your door, that's the way that you had to do it.
Yeah, and looking around the landscape in Texas, I was really seeing the breweries, have a hard time getting a lot of footing because of the fact that they couldn't have any kind of tap room or anything like that. And that was from an economic perspective, that limited the viability of the model. And also, like many of my peers, were inspired by the tale of this dude in Delaware who, started a brew pub and turned it into what today is an empire in Dogfish Head.
Oh, is that still around? Is that still
I think so. I think they're doing okay. That was very much an inspiration, and the model of, starting out as a brew pub and using that to build a reputation by which we could launch our wholesale business off of. The big key that I knew going in was that that was not legal to do in Texas, mm-hmm. And it was even part of my business plan was to and if this is in a business plan that if your business plan includes this, if you're writing one or if you're reviewing one and this line appears in the business plan, you should probably just shred it and move on with your life. That was part of the business plan was to go and change the law, which seemed easy enough. Some guy in Delaware did it, right? For his business. Why couldn't I in free market, Texas, right?
The Republic of, yes.
Yes. So didn't mind didn't think that was going to be a problem at all. So went ahead and opened the brew pub, which was great. And looking back at the context by which tap rooms are flourishing now, I think I was a little accidentally ahead of my time in terms of how we were operating. Because in Texas, you were allowed to sell beer to go if you were a brew pub. So we exploited that fully at our brew pub. Started doing rare one-off releases. Of the only probably 900 barrel brew pub in the country that had a bottling line.
That got regular use. Yeah.
They got regular use, and we were doing the same. We kind of invented what I call the Texas bottle release, which still to this day exists only for brew pubs. And Jester King has taken it to a completely different level that I could never have dreamt of. But this idea of these are beers that are only available at the brewery. We'll bottle them up. We'll have a special event. We'll release them. We'll have 500 people on our patio at 6 a.m. I'll get upset. I'll write a blog post, ask them not to do it anymore, and then next time 600 people will be on the patio. So it was an amazing experience that generated a nice return that for that I'd never really even dreamed we would achieve that level of success when we added that additional layer of these releases. So that's kind of the story of pre-law changing of Freetail and how we got to be, making beers that San Antonio definitely was not ready for, which, in 2008, San Antonio really wasn't even ready for IPA. So It wasn't hard to push the boundaries. But we certainly did, in things that are, today are kind of passe and normal, like craft brewery checklist things, in terms of, barreled aged beers, wild ales, using various odd ingredients, stuff like that. So back then, that was a big deal.
As somebody who has been covering this industry for quite a while now, Texas was never on the national radar. It just wasn't. People were talking about, obviously, progressive states like Colorado or Vermont or Oregon. California kind of got its act together pretty early. Some of the East Coast states, even Delaware, salmon and dogfish aside, like never really embraced it too much. And then all of a sudden, in 2014, with thereabouts, the laws changed in Texas. The stuff that you wanted to do early on, and other brewers who came on, you all kind of came together and changed the law. And then suddenly, everybody nationally, especially from the economic standpoint, was looking at Texas. Texas suddenly became the Wild West again, and you had huge national brands that had, been in there, but craft brands who had been in there but not really doing much with it, started making huge pushes. And then you had brands, like Bell's, who never would have thought of opening up Texas. They're coming in, and now I think pretty much all the top 25 are in there, as well. So, what changed and what happened?
I think, for some context, I remember pretty vividly standing in the warehouse of Independence Brewing in 2012.
There in Austin.
Austin, and we were discussing, what we hope to accomplish in 2013. And I had a whiteboard that kind of laid out this plan that I had devised of what we were going to try to accomplish. And there were, I think, 30 of us there. And that was like every brewery and brew pub in the state at the time, and there were 30 of us. And today there's close to 300.
It's amazing.
And and that's a growth rate that we've seen everywhere, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we've gone from, I think, in 2008 there were like 1,100 breweries when I opened, and now we have 6,000. So but it's been an accelerated growth rate in Texas, especially after we changed those laws. So the two big hurdles that we had that were holding back the industry, in my opinion, and I think a lot of why Texas wasn't talked about was that part of it is that demand isn't quite what it is in other places, but then supply was not pushing demand, and people were not being introduced to craft beer because there was no craft breweries to introduce them to it. So what we were seeing is, kind of the classic situation of, you can say that, well, people don't drink that there. Well, yeah, but people can't drink what is not available to them.
Right.
So what we did in 2013 was really open it up for breweries to be a viable business. Because, as I mentioned, people thought it was kind of dumb to open a brewery in 2008, and especially in San Antonio. And I wouldn't say they were wrong. I mean, it was a risky proposition, especially if you were going to go outside of the norm of, kind of making your standard, what I call your typical 90s, early 2000s flight of, blonde, wheat, pale, amber. And maybe the fifth was a porter if we were getting wilds, right? So what was holding it back were two specific, not laws per se, but things that were not allowed. Mm-hmm. Because in Texas we still have a unique law that says if it's not specifically allowed, it is automatically considered to be illegal. So and the joke we have is that we're unclear whether or not it's legal to pick your nose in a brewery in Texas because it's not specifically allowed. So, but the two laws we sought to change was the first was brew pubs were not allowed to sell their beer to distributors or sell to other retailers. So everything a brew pub made had to be only at the brew pub.
Right.
The second
made there at that door. Yep.
Right. And the second was a production brewery was not allowed to have any sales direct to consumers.
Okay.
So no tap room, or they could have a tap room, but they had to do this weird tour model where you buy a tour and get some tokens and a glass and
a couple of ounces.
Yeah. Right. But if but you didn't have to buy the tour to get the free beer because it's illegal to sell beer. So if I only give you beer in conjunction with a tour, I'm de facto selling it to you. So, they'd have this tour set up, but you could just walk in and say, I'm just here for my free beer. Right. And they would have to give it to you. Because that's a lot safer and protects, against intemperance than selling people beer, as we know. And all this goes back to intemperance, right? Allegedly.
Yes.
So those were the two big things. There was a multi-year effort. I really got heavily involved in it in 2009, and then again in 2011, and then 2013 is where we finally got it done. But there was, the entire state was kind of involved in varying levels. Some people just being supportive to writing a check to hire a lobbyist to actually going up to the Capitol and becoming amateur lobbyists. And for me, I was chief amateur lobbyist in the sense that I spent more time at the Capitol than I did at the brewery, to the point where sometimes people wondered if I even still worked at the brewery or not. So up there a lot, put together a coalition of our brewers to fund a lobbyist and basically put together a structure to put together, not an insignificant sum to pay for a full-time lobbyist to represent us. And it was it was a tale that probably would make a great book one day. I've got lots of great stories of being accused of running a prostitution ring or trying to lead to the legalization of marijuana. That was my ultimate goal. I was accused of that as well. But at the end of the day, we were able to get those two specific laws changed. On the production brewery side, we didn't get off-premise sales.
That's what I was going to say. So that's the one big hurdle that you guys have left.
We're the last state left in the country that you can't buy a six-pack or a growler or a bomber from a production brewery and take it with you. But what we have done.
That seems crazy. I mean, what's holding that back?
There's a case that is still before the district court, and I had the pleasure of being an expert witness and being deposed for 11 hours by the state, who challenged the very notion that breweries should be allowed to engage in this kind of activity, and it's an enthralling 200-page read. If you want to, I'll post the link to my deposition up on Twitter or something, and someone can just like blow their brains out reading 200 pages of this nonsense. But essentially, it goes back to the nonsensical arguments that we're trying to prevent stop organized crime and prevent intemperance, and
it really goes back to the repeal of prohibition arguments.
Absolutely, because that's all there is to stand on. Because what?
So it's the middle tier of the 3-tier system that's essentially preventing you guys from selling beer out of your production breweries.
Absolutely, and I think it goes to what we're seeing around the country is that the middle tier has for a very long time been granted the exclusive right to have a risk-free return off of being the middleman, and the middleman doesn't like to get cut out, right? Which sounds kind of organized crime-ish to some extent, but they don't like being left out of a transaction. And we had a law passed in 2017 in Texas, which kind of illustrates that, which is so. And I'll come back to kind of the arguments against the to-go sales, but this kind of illustrates this is what we passed in 2017, because breweries are allowed to have a tap room and sell pints across the bar. The wholesalers were not liking the way this was going, so they basically passed a law that says breweries can do this, and right now it's breweries of a certain size, and it really only affects Oscar Blues, new brewery in Austin. Breweries can engage in this activity, but they have to pay the wholesaler markup for the beer. Essentially, they have to sell the beer to the wholesalers and then buy it back.
Yeah.
But the wholesaler never touches the beer.
Right. It doesn't even leave the brewery.
Yeah. So it's a tax, a royalty, a tithe, whatever you want to call it.
Kickback.
And essentially that's what it is. And there's a lot of question of what value does that serve anyone except for distributors, and it's all wrapped up in this sanctity of the 3-tier system, which is bullshit. It's yeah.
So how do you engage your customers on this level? Because I mean, if you're spending a lot of time at the State House, you're obviously beating your brains out for that. But the 3-tiered system is such a foreign thing for most. Everybody knows. Maybe not everybody knows, but the majority, I think, of beer drinkers knows that it exists and knows the basic thrust of it. So how do you try to, and do consumers play a role in trying to change this? Or does it really have to come from the business owners themselves?
I think they do play some role, but I think that the term 3-tier system has been bandied around so much that it's become so convoluted and misunderstood by consumers that it's sometimes even counterproductive for them to engage on it. Because look, I am a supporter of the 3-tier system, the real 3-tier system, not the make-believe one that is used, as a protectionist leg, by distributors essentially. But I really, believe it's the best system. And we traveled to other countries. I was just in Mexico, last week, and new brewers there are struggling because they don't have a 3-tier system, right? And the distribution network is owned by the 2 main breweries down there, ABI and Heineken, and Heineken also owns the largest C-store outlet in Mexico,
yep.
And it's got an exclusive, for their products that's perfectly okay. So the 3-tier system is really important, and that's what consumers don't have a hard time, justifying or reconciling with the fact that they hate all the other things that hold breweries back. And to them, that's the 3-tier system. So you'll find them all. The 3-tier system's got to go, right? And I'm like, and there's brewers saying like, well, no, it doesn't have to go, but we need to really stick to what the true intent of the 3-tier system is, and not make believe ones or ones that really are arguments that don't hold up today, like organized crime, intemperance, blah blah blah.
Sure.
I mean, I haven't heard the state tell us that if you sold a 6-pack to go, at your brewery, wouldn't that lead to more drunk driving? Which is a nonsensical argument that,
Sure.
So even if they did get in their car and just shotgun 6 beers right as they part and then drive off, that risk exists.
Which we're not encouraging anybody to do, but yeah.
Yeah. But that risk exists today.
Sure.
There's other places to buy 6-packs. The source of the purchase doesn't change anything. So
I think my favorite in that vein is that Pennsylvania has drive-through liquor stores.
Yeah.
Like you can actually pull up like you would at a McDonald's and get,
And Texas does too. And
do they really?
Yeah.
Okay.
And we have, and I don't know if you can do this in Pennsylvania, because this is my favorite part of Texas drive-through liquor stores. You can get a frozen daiquiri to go. That's basically a frozen daiquiri or like a margarita, but it's sealed because it's in a plastic bag, and they provide you a straw. That
like a
later,
Capri Sun,
kind of, yeah. Well, it's like it's the cup, but then it's in like a Ziploc bag.
Okay.
But it's like if you've ever seen how people drink juice in Vietnam, right? It's just like a plastic bag with a straw in it.
Yeah.
So you just poke your straw through the plastic bag and you're drinking your daiquiri.
Sure.
But it's sealed because it's in a plastic bag with some tape.
Right.
But that's okay.
Right.
But
and even if you're not drinking, in the car, you're going to have to speed really fast to get it home before it melts.
Absolutely.
So,
it's a
damned
double
if you do, damned if you don't.
whammy. You're
I want to switch gears with you because I want to talk about the boards that you're on with the Brewers Association. So the events committee, obviously GABF this is the big one, right?
Well, CBC is equally as big for us.
But that's more industry and
right.
Yeah.
They're both as I assure you, they're both as stressful for the staff. But obviously, this is our biggest public facing. And with 45,000 beer drinkers converging on the convention center, it's the highlight of the year for sure from a beer drinker perspective. So we're here for another one. I think this one's going to be bigger and better than any. Each year we just continue to improve. We certainly have more breweries than we ever had before.
How many this year?
I don't know off the top of my head.
More than last year.
But more than last year.
Okay.
And more entries in the competition than ever before as well. And I don't know that number either, but we continue to push the limits of what our judges can achieve. So it's but it's exciting, and that's ultimately we try to keep in mind what's best for the beer drinker in this experience, because it is an experience for them. So while there's increased logistical challenges to increase the size of this thing every year, that's what people want more options. They want to discover new breweries, but they also want to get the ones that aren't available in their area. And I think that's what we provide. It's kind of a nice one-stop shop for people to experience beers they've never had before.
You guys changed some of the rules for some of the breweries that participate this year. We've obviously seen the independent seal come out, independent sort of replacing the word craft to define small breweries these days, as Anheuser and Heineken and Constellation and a lot of other large brands are coming in and buying smaller breweries and adding them to their portfolio. So we're going to see that independent, that upside-down bottle label around quite a bit. But you guys also made the decision to... And since it is not the Great American Craft Beer Festival, and that these larger breweries have always been invited to participate, and I remember Miller High Life has had its own booth for the last couple of years, and people line up and goofily drink it, and they have a good time with it. But some of those participating breweries, if the ownership doesn't jive with the BA's definition, what the BA wants, we're not going to see them in the same places this time around. And can you kind of talk about how that decision came about and why you're saying that you want to give what's best for the beer drinker? How does removing them from end caps, how does sort of decreasing their presence, how does that play in to be a best experience for the beer drinker?
Well, on that end, what we really did is, we have a limited number of sponsorships, and with demand for them exceeding supply, so we really focus that on for members. Members
of the Brewers Association.
Members of the Brewers Association, right? So and voting members who meet the definitions. Because to be clear, ABI, Miller Coors, Constellation are also, and some of their subsidiary breweries individually are also members of the BA, but they're not voting members. But so, we wanted to make sure that those end caps were going towards the voting member breweries who really embody what the mission of the Brewers Association. Because we were also getting feedback of, here you are talking about the value of independence or, the craft definition, but, we as an association have no problem accepting a $35,000 sponsorship from ABI. Isn't that a bit hypocritical? So, maybe it was a little hypocritical, so we're not going to do that anymore. So it's kind of a twofold, giving our members more of an opportunity to get that, in cap space if they desire it, but then also, ending that, kind of potentially hypocritical area of accepting money from, the companies that we are, don't embody the values and mission of the Brewers Association, which is to promote and protect, small independent craft brewers.
What do you see when you're working on events like this and things change? And beer's always been a fluid situation, no pun intended, especially with the craft definition having changed multiple times over the years. When you're thinking about events and you're thinking about the CBC or Savor or GABF or any of the other things that you guys are doing, what's the thing that keeps you up at night? What's the thing that...
Well, this week, with the tragedy in Las Vegas, that's been, the immediate concern. How do we ensure the safety of the people visiting? And we've made some big changes along the lines of security and safety over the last few years. So we'd already been moving that direction, and we feel really good about our security plan.
Okay.
So that's a big part of it. But other than that, I think for me, honestly, that'd be a great question for Nancy Johnson, the events director for the BA, because she probably stays up at night and worries. But for me, I have so much faith in her, and she's a rock star, and she's been acknowledged by event associations several times for being so. I mean, she almost it's hard to get worried when you've got. The Michael Jordan of events in your back pocket, running the event.
And she is absolutely wonderful. I guess what I meant was that when you're thinking about changing some of these rules, and when you have to have votes and think about for your members, and think about, okay, we're gonna kick butt out of an end cap, or we're going to start to change some of the rules around to make it easier for some of our members, harder for some of our members, that kind of thing. That's sort of more what I meant. Okay. of the. What are the considerations that go into making these decisions?
Well, I think as far as how people fit within the craft brewer definition, I think those were fairly easy and straightforward. And I would push back a little bit and say the BA craft definition has not changed enough over the years, in my opinion.
Okay.
It's changed twice, and this is a highly evolving industry, and but why would we want a static definition when the industry continues to evolve? So we've really only made two changes. We changed what small is,
2 to 6 million,
to 6 million, and we changed traditional. Which my first meeting on the board was when we changed traditional, and the way I view it is that was correcting a mistake.
Sure.
So
I agree. Yeah, Chase Marty wrote a great note from August Shell. And then saying we've been around forever, how come we're not traditional? I get it for ownership standards. And then we saw Yingling and Straub and Shell, all these folks come in and join the definition in the fall. I think that was a great move as well.
Yeah, and that's what I like to point to when I hear people saying well, y'all are always changing the definition. Well, no, we've changed it twice, and one of the times, I think unquestionably was a great move that is universally supported. So, we can debate the 2 to 6 million, and people are going to fall one way or another. But let's focus on the traditional one. If we can do things that we all can all agree are good, why wouldn't we want to change the definition?
So you're saying it hasn't changed enough then? I mean, what else would you like to see on the horizon? Like what are we not thinking about as consumers right now that association members are thinking of that we should be thinking of when we're defining independent or craft or, whatever we're going to call it going forward?
I think, and this is my personal opinions,
Sure.
and not the opinions of the board or the association, but
Duly noted.
yeah,
Yes.
I think I think there's a discussion to be had around independence and what it means to be independent, and I'll buffer that by saying I fully support what we're doing around independence, and I think it's vitally important, and I think it is the important exogenous issue of the time for craft beer. I still think beer quality is the most important issue for breweries to be looking at within their own organizations, and what threatens the industry. Bad beer threatens the industry more than anything else.
Sure.
But as far as external threats, I think independence really is what's we're staring down the gun barrel there, and this effort is vitally important. But I think we're operating on a definition of independence that has existed since the definition was first put in place, and I think, and I don't think anyone envisioned any of these transactions and the different kinds of transactions we're seeing. And I think we probably need to sit down and have a discussion around what it truly means to be independent. Because I think it's possible for. I think a brewery could be 49% owned by someone else and still be independent. And I think they could be 1% owned and not be independent. Because I think percent ownership is not a good gauge sometimes.
Sure, it doesn't necessarily qualify influence.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So I think that's the discussion that will be had one way or another, whether I'm on the board next year or not. And it's going to be a spirited debate, and I'm almost not sure if I want to be there for it or not, because it's I remember the 2-day meeting when we changed traditional.
Yeah.
Was stressful,
pretty
and
intense.
Yeah, and that one was easy.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's sort of a no-brainer. In retrospect, at least.
Yeah.
The other board that you're on is diversity, and this is something that obviously gets talked about a lot these days, and it's been in news accounts for the last couple years. But quickly, can you kind of tell us what the mission of that particular board is?
Well, it's a very nascent committee. We put it together earlier this year. We've been talking about it on a board level for a number of years, and it was Nick Purdy from Wild Heaven in Atlanta that first kind of raised this issue in a members meeting a few years ago of really driving it home and standing up and saying, "What are we doing? We're not." I'm sitting here in this room looking around, and we all have great ideas and we think diversity is great, but we're still a room of white dudes.
100%.
So I think
96%.
Yeah. So I think that really struck a chord with both BA staff and Bob, but also the board. So we started thinking of we have to do something. It's the right thing to do, but it's also, I think, business imperative for our industry. We self-limit the potential of craft beer when we don't widen the tent of its drinkers, and certainly, I think that's a big, when we talk about my hometown of San Antonio, that's 60% Hispanic. It's the largest Hispanic majority city in the country. That's not a demographic that is as engaged with craft beer as the white demographic, and it limits the potential for my business. And so everywhere around the country, where as we get more and more diverse, the potential universe for drinkers gets smaller and smaller. So and I hate to feel a little insensitive to talk about it in terms of strictly business terms, but ultimately the association, that's what we're our mission is not to do the right thing. It's to promote and protect small independent craft brewers. And we can do the right thing along the way, achieve our mission. So we're still figuring out exactly what it is that we should do. We've had a few meetings, and we've put together a good committee with people from all around the country of lots of different backgrounds, and not just racial or ethnic diversity, but gender diversity is still a big issue. Sexual orientation diversity is a big issue, and then economic diversity is an issue that really is relevant to craft beer that doesn't get talked about very much either. So, tackling all those fronts and seeing, I think we need to figure out where we stand today, and then figure out what the next steps are going to be. I think, unfortunately for us, is that this is a very high profile issue that wants to be talked about, but it's going to be a very slow moving issue. And I think we have decades of work in front of us, but we don't have decades to figure it out. But, we're not going to have an answer next year, maybe even the year after, but, start to slowly move the needle to make sure that everyone is welcome at the craft beer party, I like to say.
Yeah. Well, I mean, one of the things that I think has spurned out of this diversity committee is some of the beer names that are out there, and some of the, again, in the last couple of years, we've seen, brewers come out with labels that seemingly promote rape culture or demeaning to women or demeaning to various ethnic groups and all of that, and they've sort of claimed, well, yeah, but we're craft and it's okay, and but that's one of the things as well that can sort of hurt this all-inclusive nature, and I know that's one of the things that you guys are also talking about on this committee.
Yeah, and actually, so the changes we have made around that, actually came from the events committee, not the diversity committee.
Okay.
So this year at GABF, no one is censored, but if a name that is considered to be offensive wins a medal, it won't be read from the stage, and we won't license our intellectual property to that name. A lot of people have claimed this is forced censorship or something.
Well, yeah, Flying Dog, most notably, removing its pulling out of the Brewers Association because of this very thing.
Right. But the Brewers Association has a First Amendment right as well,
Mm-hmm.
right? And it's our right to not want to be associated with certain things, and we don't want to be associated with names that are deemed to be offensive.
Who deems what's offensive and what's not?
There is a panel of non-industry professionals, and I don't know, it's kind of a blind panel, and I don't know who's on it.
Okay.
I know there's some marketing professionals, there's I think a lawyer, and I think a college professor on it, and they get together, and if they're unanimous that's clearly offensive, then we deem it offensive. We're very we want to be very cautious too.
Yeah, this isn't a black and white issue. I mean, this is there's a lot of gray in this.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Yeah, but the point, I think we can all agree around the point that I don't remember which brewery did it, but somebody had date grape, right?
Yeah.
I think.
And that was a crowdsourced. I want to say it was a brewery out of Michigan. I can't remember right now, and it was a crowdsourced name, and that beer actually never got made.
Right.
But it was the customers.
Yeah.
It was the folks who actually put that forward. It wasn't the brewery.
Interesting. Yeah.
And there's been obviously enough brewers who have come up with their own
right.
clearly offensive names. But Date Grape is one of the ones that stands out.
And not to pick on that brewery, but I think most people, except for the customers who suggested it, might agree that that's too far and that's offensive and that does not belong on labels. And if we told someone like the BA is not going to say Date Grape from its stage at GABF,
right.
I think no one would really bat an eye at that. But this idea of this being the first time out and not knowing what we're not going to say, and it may not be an issue at all. We don't go pre-police every beer name out there.
Sure.
When we get the list of winners is when sit down and said, okay, this one maybe is questionable, let's send it off to the committee. So
that'll be happening. We're recording this on the Thursday of GABF, so that'll be happening
tomorrow after judgment.
Today, tomorrow, as the medal rounds start to get judged.
Right. And again, nothing may happen. But and then again, and I can also see a scenario which is, I think, an unfortunate kind of example of where some of our industry's at. I could see people trying to be I want to be the first brewery censored by the BA, right? Because that's my personality,
Right.
And that's what, hey, you can brand yourself however you want. We're not trying to tell anyone how to run their business, but you have to do so understanding that you can't expect the entire industry to rally behind you and want to be associated with that as well.
Yeah.
Because this is business, and it's, we have to act like professionals, and if you don't want to act like a professional, then you have to face the consequences or reap the rewards of that on your own. And I say that as somebody who's has lots of experience at acting unprofessionally. So so that's where we're at on that issue. I would love to see more peer pressure from brewers and beer drinkers calling out breweries when they have something offensive.
That's interesting that you say that, though, because I do think that there are consumers who do it, maybe not enough, depending on where you fall in this whole thing. But I do think that the brewers are hesitant to criticize other brewers. And I find that to be not only in issues like this, but also, you mentioned before, quality of, hey, if you have a brewery neighbor down the street who is putting out, a diacetyl bomb and they shouldn't be. A lot of the time it's like, oh, well, that's their problem. I don't want to really say anything. And it's like, that's not the smart thing. And as the industry grows, do you think we're at the point where people are more comfortable doing it? And is it more about business and less about camaraderie? What's the... I know I just took a hard left on you there. But yeah.
I think it's a great point because, there's a fine line between... hey, I think you have quality issues and I want to talk to you about it, and I just happen to think your beer sucks, so right. I'm going to go on social media and blast your brewery, right? And that's not okay either.
No, that's just a dick move. Yeah.
Right. So, I think that, but I think a lot of the peer pressure on both issues should and needs to happen a little more behind the scenes. And like, hey, you're the brewery down the street. Hey, I don't want to put you on blast, but I noticed this issue. Let's work to fix it, because your quality issues affect my ability to sell beer in our market.
Right.
And if that doesn't work, then maybe then it gets to the point where some sort of public calling out needs to happen. But we also have instances where breweries like to literally stick up their middle fingers and say, that's what craft is all about, when it's not. Maybe that's what, maybe inconsistency is part of your charm. It's but and I don't mean that like in a kind of snotty kind of way, but like a brewery like Jester King, which is world class, makes explains that inconsistency is part of their thing, from the perspective of they have a yeast culture that's forever evolving, and these beers are forever evolving, and you shouldn't expect a batch years later to be like the ones before.
Sure,
but I think people
if
can
you have
buy
a brew pub where you're making a pale ale, and I walk in one week and it's delicious, and then the next week it smells like creamed corn.
Yes.
And then the next week it's something totally different from that. That's the larger issue.
That is not quality.
Right. It's I don't think anybody could fault Jester King or any of those other spontaneously fermented breweries or cool ship users or anybody else from. And I agree, that is part of the charm of it. But the larger issue is
Yeah, but when I put my Pilsner in a can and put it in the grocery store shelf, I should be working for it to taste the same every single time.
I'd hope so.
Right. I mean that, and I shouldn't, saying that, well, I'm craft and it just always changes, sounds like a lazy cop out more than anything else. So, and I think that's where brewers should be, not hesitant to say, like, yeah, that's not okay. And
consumers as well.
And I think consumers are better at it than brewers right now. I think beer drinkers don't have a problem of saying these things, which is good. I do think especially in certain, bubbles that we like to hang out sometimes, I kind of question the tasting ability of some consumers and kind of wonder, like, what are you really into here? Because this is, I don't know. I don't understand why you like this.
Yeah.
So there's that aspect to it. But for the most part, I think beer drinkers are fairly good at calling it out, but it's also still a little too easy to sell bad beer right now. And hopefully local is not trumping quality. I think local is important and a great economic, theory that people should get behind and support, but quality has to be, the top of the pyramid, in the table stakes, and there should be no shame in passing up the local beer because it's bad, and you shouldn't be shamed into feeling bad about it because, well, you're not supporting local. Well, I'm supporting quality first, and then I'll support local. So that's where I think, beer drinkers are good. Brewers should not be afraid to be a little more vocal, but still try to be tactful.
I think that's a good place to leave it. Scott, if people want to find your brewery online, where do they go?
Freetailbrewing.com. Of course, like most people, we're in a social media age, so
Yes.
Social media is a great place. So we're on Facebook, we're on Twitter, we're on Instagram. And then if you like to hear nonsensical stuff, you can follow me personally on Twitter at Beer Monkey.
Which is a fun feed to follow. Scott, thanks so much. This is, we're at the end of the show. Thanks so much for listening. We hope you enjoy what you've heard. Please subscribe to the podcast and also subscribe to Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine. You can learn more at beerandbrewing.com. If you have suggestions on how we can make the show better, guests you want to hear, or questions that you might want to hear answered on air, please email me at johnholl, JOHNHOLL, at beerandbrewing.com, or you can join the conversation on my Twitter, which is John_Holl, again, HOLL. Scott, thanks again.
Thank you.
And we'll talk to y'all soon. Cheers.
This podcast is brought to you by Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine for those that love to make and drink great beer. Learn more online or subscribe at beerandbrewing.com or find us on social media at Craft Beer Brew.